And now right.
Okay, I'm Russell Nash. I'm going to do my VFR today on a powered parachute. My number is 014577. There's my license card. Okay, we're going to do it today in my Summit 2-seater with an elliptical chute. We have down here the maximum takeoff weight is 409 kilos. My registration number is E328012. If we come around to the front, you'll see my registration details and my ELSA placard on the instrument panel. Okay, so now we're going to do a pre-flight. So what we'll do, we'll start at the front. We'll start with the wheel, the front wheel. We'll make sure it's inflated correctly. We'll make sure that the bearings are all okay and the nuts and bolts are all in place. We'll move up through the steering to the steering wheel and make sure that there's no slack and the steering works correctly. We've got brakes. We make sure that the brakes work correctly. They do. Then I move to the steering control. This has foot steering, and we check that it slides freely. And we do the same on the other side. I'll get to that when we go around. Okay, I check the seat to make sure it's secure, and I check that the seat belts are in good condition. Then I go and check nuts and bolts and rivets to make sure they're all in place. I'll go and just give it a bit of a shake to make sure everything's still nice and strong and I can't feel anything loose. I then go to the parachute risers, which are cable risers, to the parachute, and I check the condition of the cable risers, make sure the cables are okay and there's no fraying and they're in good condition. I also check the bolts and the clamps for the parachutes and the pulleys for the steering lines. I do the same on the rear, make sure the clamp is in place, the bolts are in place and everything's nice and tight. I also check the rear seat tank, make sure it's okay, and check the seat belts are all okay. Because this is a seat tank, we've got enough at 20 litres an hour. We've got about 35 litres there, so there's more than enough for a 45-minute flight. There's enough fuel in the tank for that. I check the suspension on my way around, make sure everything's okay, give everything a good shake, make sure that all of the nuts and bolts are in place. I check the wheels, make sure that there's no looseness in the bearings, and I check that there's thread coming out of the nut at the bottom to make sure that's okay. I make sure all the drag strut is okay. I come around to the back, I check the exhaust system, make sure it's all good, all of the bolts holding it on are all okay, and of course I've got safety wires as well to make sure everything's okay there. I check my oil tank, I make sure I've got enough oil in the reservoir for a flight for more than 45 minutes. I check the coolant overflow, there's plenty of coolant in there, and I check the spark plugs to make sure that they're all secure and in tight, and also check things like the cooling hoses, make sure they're secure and okay, and the engine mounting bolts, make sure there's thread coming out of the bottom of the engine mounting bolts. Just a general check. I also check the propeller, make sure there's no play, everything's free and all of the bolts are all in place and have the correct number of threads coming out the other side. I check the radiator, make sure it's nice and secure, and check all the other bolts as I work my way around. Make sure the bolts are all okay and in the right place. Again, I give it a good shake. I make sure there's oil in the reservoir for the valve, the inlet valve. And again, I check that the bearings on the wheels are okay, and the nut has thread coming out the other side of it, so she's in nice and tight. And I just give a good check of everything and make sure everything's nice and tight. Seat bolts, make sure the seat bolts are okay. Check my fuel, make sure my fuel's on and ready to go. And again, the parachute risers, I check the shackles, the steering lines, and of course the riser cables again, make sure they're all nice and strong and there's no frayed cables of any sort. Also check the brackets on the riser connection points on to the aircraft. check rivets and bolts, working my way around. I check the throttle quadrant, make sure it's in good condition and nice and tight. And I'm back to the front to the steering controls, and I make sure that they're all okay. That's pre-flight. Thank you.
I'll do it.
Keep going.
Is it still going? Okay. Right. A couple of things to consider, Russ.
Mm-hmm.
When you do the carbies, come behind the carbies itself.
Yep.
Push the carbies down enough.
Yep.
Just have a look to see if there's any hairline fractures in the rubbers, because it's a common fault for Rotax.
Okay.
But these ones are great anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
When you check the props, just run your fingers over the nuts itself.
Yeah.
Just feel if there's any loose nuts itself, because they can wriggle loose.
Yep.
But other than that, you've done a pretty thorough check through the whole lot. I would consider just checking the riser support things here.
Yep. Check the nuts and bolts down there.
And also the engine mount one there. By you can actually twist it. And this one's tied as, which is great.
Okay.
But other than that, you've done a fine job, mate.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Let's go to the next step.
Let's go flying.
Done.